Good afternoon, folks. We got a question about how much the elites know about what's going on with Earth's magnetic pole shift and coming great solar flash, and if they are preparing. That's a big yes. We will go over some examples, from billionaires to the government to celebrities, and then go over some prepping basics that you should have in mind if you are indeed strong enough mentally to face the cosmic Super Bowl coming to our planet. First, Jeff Bezos. We have several videos on this already, but it's worth remembering. He is hollowing out a mountain in the Sierra Diablos in the southern portion of what we call the New Valley of the Sun, and that mountain is right across from his Blue Origin launch facility. From this one location, he can go up or go below, about the most impressive of preparations among the elites. He also has contingencies for having to ride the water, as his new super yacht is basically the modern world version of the Black Pearl. Up, down, and ocean. And Elon Musk isn't far behind. Obviously, his SpaceX capabilities give him the ability to go up, but few people know about his Boring Company, which is anything but boring, the most adept subterranean capabilities in the civilian world. The idea of flight in space or in the atmosphere does seem daunting to me, given the changing magnetism will trouble navigation, not to mention the increased radiation with altitude, but maybe they know something we don't know. Government's another story. This map is almost 10 years old, and it only contains acknowledged facilities. Who knows how many more there are? Just look at the concentration near the New Valley of the Sun on the eastern front of the Rockies. A good rough estimate, with just these known, acknowledged facilities, is room and supply for millions. In addition to bunkers being a new trend among billionaires, celebrities are no stranger to this movement either. Some are outright open about their plans, their bunkers, their prepping stashes, and others are more secretive and like to brand their activities as other kinds of facilities that don't usually make sense to be underground, which tells us a lot about what they're really doing. It's worth noting that many of these facilities are in bad locations, are electrified and rely on that electricity, and that's what I call preparing to inflict a personal disaster. Air systems, lights, refrigeration, heating, and even doors which operate on electricity are not likely to survive the big solar flash EMP in working order, and no, being underground doesn't help there. The strongest induction of electricity is in the crust, and is indeed a form of induction, does not rely on a direct line of sight to the sky like cosmic radiation does. Likewise, many celebrities are building these near the coastlines, which makes me think someone only told them half the story. Having a bunker in LA, for example, is a terrible idea. And that brings us to some advice. We couldn't possibly cover everything related to every situation on Earth, but let's go over what we've discussed over the years, starting with location. This has many aspects to it. You don't want to be near a coastline or near a big city with big population. You do want a more rural, inland area. Altitude is key, and no, there is no general rule for what altitude is safe. If a bunker is too expensive, you can get that rural location to have a mine or a cave, and that can be just as good or better in some circumstances, which shifts us to the shelter discussion. Humans have survived this event every time, but with evidence of major hits each time as well. The ones who survive do indeed seem to have prepared with appropriate shelters, whether those are subterranean systems or large structures. There is the need to protect from direct radiation and potential impactors raining down. The micronova shell is going to be full of cooling and congealing plasma, even down to the microtektite scale. And while it seems they didn't live full-time underground for years in the previous disasters, the radiation, falling pieces, and changing weather make a solid shelter a very good option. Just remember, direct radiation exposure is different than induced current, and that is where we shift to supplies. Folks, batteries are not a terrible thing to store, neither are small solar-powered devices, but those are a stopgap. Induction will surge that current through the crust regardless of what's above your head, and preparing to live in a post-electrical world is paramount. This is not just having stored food and water, but seeds and tools to plant and harvest them, ones that were used in the pre-industrial era. Everything logical says protection, like guns, will be helpful, but I can't sit here and guarantee that they wouldn't melt or be significantly altered during a strong induction from the solar blast. This is where a small Faraday cage is most useful, I think, not for the radio or the flashlight, but for guns and metal tools. Don't get me wrong, battery-powered devices are still invaluable, as in the transition, any advantage is big. Just know that it won't last, and there needs to be preparation for something more ancient. A compass is good, for example. You will need to begin relearning the world orientation after this event, and that's part of planning. You need several flavors of planning. What you do when your battery devices run out. What is your plan for repairing shelter if needed, or planting, foraging, hunting? What will you do so you don't lose your mind? What about your family's needs, children, medicine, bugging out, plans for if you see other people? Plans for cooperation with others probably require challenging discussions now, ahead of time. And this does tie back into the supplies topic. Having several years of supplies, seeds for several seasons, everything you'd need to make it while you harden and relearn to survive the world. Now, here's the hard part. You need to consider every aspect of the progress in this event. As Earth's magnetic field weakens, the supply chains and continuity of the world will worsen. The sun may take out our power years before the biggest event, with lower magnetic protection for our planet. What if you have to pull an audible and abandon your place? What if the waters rise to your location? Having something that floats would help. What if the climate changes in your location by a significant degree? This is a very personal thing, the planning. It's different for everyone and every location. True, previous survivors likely lived in a survival state already and were better prepared to live that way. But we have information and technology on our side. Not to mention that you can still go to a store or go online and get a lot of stuff now, even with the deteriorating supply chains. Humans will survive in various places all over the world, as they did before. But fortune will favor the prepared, the hard, the strong, and the adaptable. Now, just for a little extra, let's go ahead and rewatch a simple, qualitative disaster awakener we posted last year. I'll see you in the morning for the daily show. Be safe, everyone. Earth enjoys long, quiet eras commanded by the slow grind of wind, rain, and geology. These periods are punctuated by a recurring catastrophe. We're coming to the end of one of these calm periods, and a disaster is coming. By combining millennia of evidence, centuries of study, and the modern capabilities of technology, we can answer the challenge to explain all the evidence of Earth's disaster cycle, and we have all the tools to track the next one. We have dozens of videos on this topic, including a full movie, follow-up breakthroughs, and seen a shift in the peer-reviewed literature that seamlessly blends with the paradigm. Today, we're not going over papers or the science behind the events or the cycle or their individual mechanisms of action. We're going to lay out the order of events we most expect to happen and offer our best constrained timelines for each. The listing of the events and their timelines is most helpful, but only with the appropriate understanding of what each actually is and its significance. So let me tell you a story first. Before any of you were born, the leading edge of the galactic current sheet arrived at our solar system. It began what will finally present a 10% change in interstellar density and the galactic magnetic reversal. The Sun announced the arrival with a superflare. Early solar scientists tied a massive sunspot group to a geomagnetic disaster unheard of at the time. In 1859, the Virgin Electric Age was razed, literally, to the ground, as the Carrington Event solar storm surged electric current through the planet that would not only set telegraph wires on fire, but would induce the beginning of the modern magnetic excursion of Earth. The Earth's field began shifting, the climate began warming, the magnetic field began weakening, the poles shifting faster and faster. It would be more than 100 years before we'd realize that the other planets were changing too, seemingly accelerated of late, and we would wait just as long to learn that the stars in line with the center of the galaxy were performing record outburst activity, one after another, in a line, right at the sun, and we're next. It would be 2020 before we learned that the sun's coronal magnetic fields were reacting, and the chemistry of its atmosphere was beginning to change, most notably in the helium. Thus far, the changes we see from the ground are more due to Earth's changing magnetic field and its effect on the upper atmospheric lens through which we view the sun, such that the once yellow sun now looks more white at greater and greater angles of the day. I know many remember the look of the yellow sun. I'm just old enough to remember it looking white near the noon position and thinking, maybe it's just too bright to see the yellow properly way up there. That's not what this is. The first horseman, dressed in white, wearing a crown at the top of the sky. That takes us from 1859 to today, and the big question is, what happens next? The most likely answer is that a significant solar flare, perhaps not even as great as the Carrington event, will impact Earth in the coming years as our planet's magnetic field continues to weaken, and will be enough to destroy the electrical age once and for all. A big enough solar storm means every copper wire melts, every grid is gone, many buildings burned down. There is no power, gasoline, ATMs, banks, grocery, refrigeration, natural gas, heat, AC, no water unless you have a manual well, no factories to rebuild, no vehicles to transport, no 911. With Earth's field weakening, this is by far the most likely candidate to begin the next level series of challenges. And when the internet is a memory, you'll have to watch the skies, the clouds, and the sun. You'll have to watch nature, the animals. The more you can recognize abnormal behavior, the better. Then again, you'll be growing and canning or foraging or hunting for your food, quite busy, and battling the elements like they did before time was time. Most of us will be in the same state as many of the creatures who depend on the field, completely lost, lucky to get where we need to go. This period could last for years. If the sunspot cycle delivers that blast to Earth, we could have a decade of surviving something between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. But then one day, as the survivors are getting into a groove, those chemical changes on the sun will begin to manifest through to the visible wavelengths as the second horseman arrives, and the civility of all who are left is challenged, if not outright stolen. This will test people's will, their character, and their faith. When the sun's atmosphere completely darkens, the upper corona and the sun's version of the Van Allen belts will be the only thing shining. It may just be the outer circles of the torus as in the plasma discharge Z-pinch, or it may be some visible ring around the black sun as one might envision its version of the Van Allen belts. The third horseman's scales of justice will tip and teeter to the sides of the sun above all. Then, when the light and solar wind energy overcomes its shell, through the dust and gas and plasma of the long period recurrent solar micronova, we will find the final horseman in a familiar pale hue, but hell follows with him. The blast itself creates a titanic outburst of light across the spectrum, and cosmic rays following right on their heels. The light arrives in 8 minutes, but has the potential to burn the sun-facing region directly looking at the sun at that time. The high-energy proton cosmic ray storm that ensues will be an invisible component of the disaster, as if anyone could take their eyes away from what would be coming right at us at that time. These cosmic rays integrate with the Earth's magnetic field, and may begin the turning over of the Earth via the full planet electromagnetic insult. But before long, the actual shell arrives, and it arrives with the smallest and most energetic parts impacting first, a mega CME shockwave that compresses the Earth's sun-facing fields while surging them, creating the arc discharge others call the thunderbolt of the gods. There should also be a discharge out the other side, and perhaps the poles as well. This is more than just a planetary-level lightning strike and discharge. It sucks the water where it wishes, and triggers incredible tsunamis from that effect, and from the seismicity induced by its effect on underground water, metal, and crystals like olivine, which translocate upon discharge. This outstanding attraction to current can disrupt atmospheric density equilibrium as well, and depressurize parts of the world, sucking down stratospheric air, instantly freezing the surface, while frozen waters and glaciers and mountains of ice chunks from the modern poles could be cascading from their places into those same areas. The wind will enhance the tsunamis and storms, and all while something even more horrifying is happening below our feet. The volcanoes will begin to go off as the electromagnetic insult unlocks the low-velocity zone, induces through the large, low-shear velocity provinces, and triggers the kick of Earth's magnetic field through its reversal process, and as the world sways like a drunkard, tilting as Einstein, Cuvier, Deluc, and, according to Major White, how the Pentagon and US CIA believe it will tilt, 90 degrees, back and forth each cycle, alternating to put the poles cyclically in the same places, but in between, in the transition, a disaster. As the tsunamis are rolling and the Earth is tilting, the heaviest aspects of the micronova shell arrive, the impactors. Some are asteroids pushed out of normal orbits, some are plasmic forms, cooled and congealed from the micronova shell itself as it travels through space. The Sun has been hidden from Earth this entire time since the micronova eruption, and even after it begins to shine on us again, the dust from the nova, the volcanic aerosols, and the water vapor produced by the event will cloud out Earth's atmosphere and continue to rapidly cool the planet. As has been the case every time before, however, 12,000 years ago in Gothenburg, 24,000 years ago in Lake Mungo, 36,000 years ago in Mono Lake, and before that in Lachamp, Vostok, Toba, and Blake, humans will be left on almost every continent as though the torrents and winds and impactors were somehow attracted to unlucky areas while others seem spared. The Sun will be flaring at very intense levels at this time due to the micronova shell release effect on the corona and the photosphere. And the rapid ice melt due to those solar flares is what has been identified by Dr. Peratt, Dr. Schock, and now even Randall Carlson, and takes only a few weeks to perhaps only a few days' time after that rapid cooling. The cycle has reset, and we try to do better next time. Now, let's see that story again in list form, and go over the timelines of each of these events in order as we most expect them to happen. Right now, we are in that first stage as we described it. The galactic sheet front boundary triggered the 1859 solar storm and the beginning of the magnetic excursion at Earth. We know today that the nearby stars, planets, and the Sun are changing with us. The next up event is likely to be the solar kill shot, the technological disaster that steals our modern society from us, sending us back into survival mode. That is a very real chance of being this sunspot cycle in just the coming years. We had a number of close calls last sunspot cycle, and the field is not getting any stronger. After there aren't any electric screens to watch anymore, we'll be watching the weather and the animals change, and with it, the solar changes begin to manifest at those visible scary levels, the reddening and the full darkening, progressing to these stages likely in the 2030s. The solar micronova itself is next, blasting off the shell, darkening the Sun, and bringing as drastic a change as the solar kill shot, and more. Until we see how it progresses, the timelines here are difficult, but it's fair to assume that Earth's weakening field is a fair approximation, and that one points to the 2030s to 2040s for the reversal point. When the micronova happens, the cosmic rays begin, the Sun-facing quarter burns, and a few hours later, the shell impact occurs at Earth, delivering the arc discharge, the winds, the depressurization and rapid freeze, the tsunamis, earthquakes, and all while within just minutes, the induction is producing that electromagnetic insult to the core. Whether via torque to the entire system, effects on the LLSVPs, or via unlocking of the crust at the low velocity zone, the Earth turns over, bringing more tsunamis, quakes, and volcanoes. The cold sets in deeply thereafter, almost immediately in a days-long global night, but outgassing and solar flaring quickly begin to reverse the process, leaving those who survive the gauntlet to ease back into a calmer period after only a few weeks. There will be melt-driven flooding, crustal settling quakes and tsunamis and volcanoes, and more extreme climate and weather swings than we see now, but it will pale in comparison to what the previous years have brought them, and especially the previous few days. Every one of us is descended from survivors, who are descended from survivors before them, and survivors before them. We will be left on almost every corner of the globe, even if those corners aren't where they are now. More resources can be found below the video, new updates every single day. I'll see you in the morning. Be safe, everyone.